Let's podcast after dark alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. It is 12:10 on a Friday morning. North Carolina is out of the NCAA tournament. Lauren, we are denied an all Elite Eight matchup between Clemson and North Carolina. Instead, we get a bizarro football showdown between Clemson and Alabama in the Elite Eight, as we all predicted. I'm sure we'll get a bunch of Dabo and Nick Saban takes between now and Saturday's matchup. But let's start with the Tar Heels getting bounced by Alabama. To me, I get that you can easily oversimplify things, but I think it's warranted in this situation.
Who said it?
Your best players need to be your best players. And when Elliot Cadeau's hitting some threes, when Seth Trimble's hit some threes, when Paxton Wojcik has hit a three, when these ancillary guys who Nate Oates purposely allowed open so that by all means take your chances of hitting threes, and they did, and RJ Davis goes 0 for 9 from beyond the arc, 4 of 20, and just really forcing things in the second half. You're going to leave yourself open to getting upset like this, and that's exactly what happened in the second half. They just went cold. They couldn't overcome it. They still had a chance to win, Lauren, but it just you cannot get that kind of performance out of a player of the year like RJ Davis and expect to win.
Yeah, and I mean, look, you kind of put that in a long line of, and I'm not saying this to like pile on UNC people that are around, but like it's happened before, in Carolina history where a good shooting guard especially really struggles in the NCAA tournament somewhat inexplicably too. Like it's not like we had any indication going into this that RJ was struggling. I think he just sort of started off badly and couldn't quite get it back, kind of banged up his arm at one point. I wasn't sure how much that was impacting things later, but he started off he was like 1 for 6 already or something at that point too. So, I think Alabama is not a very good defensive team by the metrics, but I don't think that's why Carolina struggled. I think Carolina got a little caught up in the style that they were playing against, in my opinion.
Agreed.
And they started Alabama is going to chuck it. They're going to chuck it up. They're going to chuck up some threes. Mm-hmm. They're going to hope most of them go in, but they're going to win or lose with that. They will live or die with it. And Carolina, they can hit threes. They have shooters, but that's not the kind of team they are. They are an inside-out team. They have to attack from the inside out, whether it's penetration or through Armando Bacot, and that's just not something that happened tonight.
No, I'm with you on this. I didn't think that Alabama did anything spectacular defensively. I actually thought that North Carolina, for whatever reason, decided to speed things up in the half court when they didn't need to. They're capable of running. I mean, I think we've seen flashes of that. We talked about this after the Duke Carolina game at Cameron Indoor. There was a stretch there where Duke got back into that game. I think they got it back to 1 with like 17 or 16 minutes left in the half. And then for whatever reason, Duke decided to try to speed it up with Carolina. And Carolina was like, yeah, fine. You guys want to do this? Let's do it. And that's where they started to open up the game. And I thought tonight there were moments, especially in that first half, where it was a back and forth and I needed a cigarette after that. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe you go back to it, and if you're Hubert Davis, can you say, can we decline halftime? Can we just keep playing? Like, can we just do a commercial break and just keep going right now?
Honestly, I don't think that would have been the best idea, considering Armando Bacot, among others, looked gassed.
Yeah, that's true. But
because they're playing like, it's up and down and up and down. Like it's not, and again, like Carolina was at its best when it was sharing the ball, working for the best shots. I know Alabama did do one thing. They were kind of hedging on screens, and Carolina couldn't quite find a way to counter that well enough. But that's, that still, like, that should be something where you can work and get better shots. The Jalen Withers shot, that was the killer. The missed dunk by Bacot and that shot, to me, stand out the most as like, those are the biggest backbreaker, because Withers had literally saved the game for Carolina the play before by getting that ball back on the offensive rebound. And then to take that shot in that situation, like that early in the shot clock, he's been more good than bad for Carolina this year, but that was just a rough moment for him.
The other thing too about Carolina in the second half, when you go back and Carolina fans are going to replay this thing, and Alabama, you say that Carolina was gassed. I'm not going to disagree with you.
No, just a Bacot for sure. I don't know about everybody else.
But in the second half, it was a battle of attrition that I thought Alabama was ultimately losing, whether it was because of foul trouble, whether it was because of injury. Key guy getting off the floor there for a bit. So to me, I thought, okay, Carolina, who's shown the ability to kind of grind it out, win some grimy games, tough it out, has showed elements of sneaky depth at time. I know they're not the deepest team, but they've gotten quality minutes out of key guys when needed. And again, I get back to what I said earlier. If you're going to get that kind of production out of Elliot Cadeau, who is a liability when it comes to shooting, especially here late in the season, and clearly Nate Oates was like, fine, man, you take it. You're going to get all that. I thought they ultimately would win that battle of attrition, but it gets back to where I think you and I both agree. For whatever reason, they rushed things. They never really got into a rhythm.
Never looked comfortable.
I'm not trying to take away from Alabama here because they played a hell of a game and they hit big shots. Don't get me wrong, but I think we can all watch Carolina play and just ask the question: why were you rushing? Why were you pressed? A team that looked poised. I know Jordan Cornette. We talked to Jordan Cornette today about that, and we were in agreement with him. Carolina's been a poised team most of the year, even when they went through that weird stretch in February after a hot January. They still were in games at the end. So I thought it was kind of weird that they lost that composure, and RJ Davis was really rushing things. And it's kind of it's weird. I don't know if you want to read too much into it, but the game before that, Caleb Love, who was the Pac-12 Player of the Year, was held in check by Clemson. I thought that had more to do with the way Clemson plays defense. There's a consistency in what Clemson has done all year to teams who shoot well from beyond the arc. This just followed that pattern in the grand scheme of things. But I thought it was interesting that these two key components to Carolina, these two guards that are just kind of tied together, that people were looking forward to potentially in an Elite Eight matchup, both had really bad nights to have a bad night in the grand scheme.
Yeah, I mean, like RJ was able to kind of attack and get to the foul line some late, at least, even though his shots weren't going in. But Caleb was just kind of, and we know this about Caleb. This isn't said like to hate on him or anything. He just kept chucking it because that's what Caleb does. He just keeps chucking it. And I mean, that's not obviously RJ shot it 20 times. I'm not saying he didn't, but you want a guy like that to shoot it. And I don't think he took a few forced shots, but a lot of shots he got were decent enough looks. They just weren't going in. And I think he was just so shaken up by how difficult everything was that it kind of compounds on itself almost. Like when you're not seeing the ball go in and you're like, I know I'm better than this. And you just start pressing. And I think that pressing was kind of contagious almost. But yeah, it is weird and kind of crazy that you look at it and you're like, wow, their former guard really struggles and kind of shoots his team out of a game. And then RJ can't hit a broadside of the barn, in the next game.
To the YouTube comments, we got the live chat going on as we do this little OG after dark after Carolina gets knocked out of the NCAA tournament. A hell of a game to watch. Who had Zona and UNC losing on their bingo card?
Probably not many.
Not many. And I'm a little disappointed because I thought we were going to get an ACC Elite Eight matchup, and there's a potential for a Duke State Elite Eight matchup too. I mean, who could ask for anything more, right? Half of the Elite Eight made up by ACC squads. That's what I wanted. That really was going to get people to start tweeting through it. And we'll get to the bizarre nature of people like Julius Hodge, NC State legend, saying, I'm actually pulling for UNC to win this because it speaks to...
Is this Jules's fault?
No, I don't think so. Although I do have some people on Twitter asking whether or not there's UNC shit now that NC State shit is done. Like the universe has to have balance.
Guys, right? In basketball, are we really doing this?
No,
in football, as I have said this, and I will die on this hill. Do not care what anyone says. In football, it exists. I'm sorry.
But not here.
It's not here.
Not here.
No.
From Michael, Governor Cooper ain't happy. No, he's not. Hopefully he's taking a stiff drink from the ACC tournament runner-up mug that we gave him with the brackets. From Andrew, worst three-point shooting performance by UNC in how long? That miss up to 2 with a minute left was brutal. I don't have the Ken Palm in front of me right now. I'm sure if I have a little bit of time to pull up on Twitter, Brian Ives probably has some fun fact about UNC's shooting and how bad it was in comparison to some other bad shooting nights. But yes, it was a terrible shooting performance tonight especially by RJ Davis. From Bubba, to be honest, the game was lost in the first half with bad shot selection. I don't know about that. In the first half, I thought the first half was a good back and forth. Honestly,
they were up 9.
Yeah. I mean, Honestly, I thought that was the case. So,
We do have a Seth Davis tweet.
hold
You
on.
want me to send it to you?
Hold on a second. Let me pull it up. Let me pull it up on Twitter, I guess.
It was just texted to me.
It's funny. It's jeez. Let me pull
No,
up.
it's great. It's super fun when like media people only want to dunk on others and then get mad when others dunk on them.
Oh, I see this one. Is this the tweet? Is this the tweet we're talking about? ACC regular season champs lost to the SEC's third best team. The ACC's third place team lost in the Friday first four by 25 points. Is the ACC still underrated and disrespected?
Wait, oh wow. Okay, so those are the ones you say.
The NCAA tournament is a beautiful mess. That's why we love it. Let's just enjoy it. That's the problem, though. That's
you can't let us because you say things like that, and that's literally all you say.
Yes,
you literally just pick the only losses, and then you wonder why people are mad.
Yeah, that's why we love it. Let's just enjoy it. I think the problem that we're having right now is that people aren't letting us enjoy it.
Like whenever the ACC started to have fun, all these national people wanted to be like, well, wait a minute here. Who's to say that the ACC, we can't say the committee made any mistakes at all, ever. And that's not at all what's happened here. This league was just not very good and magically found some ways to win all these games when the tournament started. Don't know how they keep doing it. It's wild.
Yeah, and like, what was it? Dan Wolken. And Dan's my guy, man. But it's like, what are we doing here? Dan Wolken tweets out, truly a terrible performance by UNC, win or lose. Hubert isn't good, which we already knew.
Who's we?
We did? Who's we? What's this collective we? This is beyond the pale. And I responded to him. I'm like, hold up. You're telling me that the ACC Coach of the Year, who had
already been to a Final Four,
a squad that finished atop the regular season standings, was in the ACC title game, and was the number one seed, and as you pointed out, was in the Final Four 2 years ago. Is it a good coach? The guy who went and got the right pieces in the portal to help complement what he had, who has worked along with Elliott Cadeau and everything else. And then when I responded to him, he just basically said, "Well, let's touch next year." Well, you're talking about this year. You can't sit here and tell me he's not a good coach when all these things are happening. And I talked about this earlier today on the podcast, me and Julio. And it's like, I'm really at a loss as to why everybody's being a jerk. Like, I don't get it. I really don't understand what the ACC did.
And it's like,
make everybody
that's what bothers me is what you said, because you're right. It's like strictly to the ACC. And we were just sitting here minding our own business, most of us. In fact, I've had ACC fans in my mentions most of the year being like, I wish we didn't suck so much. This is terrible. And I'm like, y'all are buying into what you're being sold. Like, that's what I was even like thinking at the time. And I said it to some people. I'm like, I don't really think it's that bad. Like, I've watched other leagues. I don't think their mid-tier teams are really any different than the ACCs. Like, I understand looking at the net and the selection process and hand-wringing because you have to. Like, the committee did right by the league overall, in my opinion, in terms of like the way it selects teams usually. If you have a bad non-con, you're going to get left out if they have a chance to leave you out, period. Clemson shouldn't have been a 6 seed. I will die on that hill. Like, Wisconsin a 5? Why? For what? Sorry, that was trash. Like, no one wants to own that. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we can't admit that there were like any mistakes in the seeding process here. Like, we can't look at this and go, wow, it is weird that this league that is continuously undervalued by this formula continues to get into this event and perform well. Because here's the thing. The point of the net is supposed to be getting teams into the field that will win games in it.
Yeah. I'm almost sick and tired of the conversation, but because it's an unwinnable argument at this point. People have just decided it, and they're going to.
Well, I'm not going to let people tell me what's true.
I mean,
what? I've got enough people. I've got enough liars doing that in areas of life where it impacts me far more to let a bunch of idiots online some of which have probably watched a grand total of like 7.5 ACC games, 2 of which were probably Duke, Carolina, to tell me what ACC basketball is and is not. I'm not.
I am with you on that. It's actually something that I've been struggling to articulate in a polite way, because I've gotten to know a lot of these national people over time, but sometimes, like, I think this year it finally kind of made me go, are you watching? I don't think you're watching. I mean, I certainly didn't see any. And again, I said this on the podcast earlier today, where I understand that the media landscape is different, and money's not cheap. Travel is not, I mean, it's true. I mean, that's a thing. Like, money just isn't cheap right now. And you're not flying to places. The travel's been cut back immensely. You're not really, you're having to rely on different ways to assess how good or bad basketball teams are. But at some point, you do get kind of fooled by numbers if you don't actually watch the games. And it's pretty clear that some people aren't watching this basketball. I mean, Seth Davis had tweeted out some nonsense about the ACC being top heavy. And it was like, dude, tell me you didn't watch a lot of ACC basketball without telling me you watched a lot of ACC basketball. Because this was not a top heavy. This was not a top heavy league this year.
It's
all right.
Mid heavy. It's full of mids.
Yes. And mids that'll go pretty far in the NCAA tournament and get to the Sweet 16. But and it's weird too. The other thing about understanding the ACC and not understanding the ACC, and I'm really trying not to be gatekeepy about this because I cannot stand gatekeeping. I really can't. But sometimes I do get a little defensive about what we watch and what we cover when it's pretty clear that you're not paying attention. And I don't know, maybe
right. And like, also, here's the thing: we know when it's bad.
Yes,
we'll tell you when it's bad.
Yes,
I promise you. Like, it was not. You know when it was bad, and worse last year. It was bad.
Yeah, last year was bad.
But they made some coaching hires. Things improved. Hopefully Louisville will rescue itself from drowning in awfulness like it's been doing. But like. It got better this year. We all saw that. We saw the non-conference wins. We saw those happen, right? We did. We all saw those.
Yeah.
And then everyone was acting like, no, it's just the same thing. And it's like, no, it's really not.
Yeah, it's weird. And speaking of Louisville, from Justin on the YouTube comment, ACC once again screwed by Louisville basketball. Withers a transfer
metaphor
from. Well, come on, man. Although that was a bad sequence. That was a bad sequence.
Yeah, I hate that for him because he really has played well in a lot of other instances, but that just wasn't one of them.
So I think to kind of wrap the point on North Carolina before we move over to what Clemson did, and obviously we got games tomorrow with Duke and NC State in their respective Sweet 16 matchups. North Carolina corrected a lot of the bad from the previous year. Yeah. And I want people to follow me here with what I'm about to go through, because there is a tendency to overreact. And I want to tie together the ending of this year and how people are going to be talking about Hubert Davis and this Tar Heel squad going forward in a similar fashion to how we talked about North Carolina and Hubert Davis and this roster this past season. Let's not retcon how we talked about UNC last year. They opted out of the NIT for reasons that I understood.
Yeah.
The NIT was not the reason why these guys were there. The NIT, with the way the transfer portal window works now, doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're trying to remake your roster, you have to be on it now, right? Because the calendar is dumb. The NCAA probably has to change the calendar if they want to change these types of things, but we'll see if they actually do it. And you'll remember with the rash of transfers out of the program, there was a holy crap, what is going on with the Tar Heel program? Not understanding or having a hard time processing that North Carolina was going to be experiencing college basketball just like everybody else.
Yes, they're no longer immune from the transfers the way they used to be when Roy Williams was still there. They're just not, and I think that's okay with them at this point, and they've seemingly have adjusted just fine.
Well, that's the thing. And after the hand wringing and the freak out, it was pretty clear what Hubert Davis was trying to do. Right? If you knew your core pieces were going to be Armando Bacot and RJ Davis, how do you complement that? Well, they went out and got Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan. That complemented things. Elliot Cadeau reclassified and allowed RJ Davis to play off the ball. And Elliot Cadeau, while has been an adventure here down the stretch.
You see the potential. You see the upside. Yeah, but he had a rough one today.
He did. He had a rough one today. He's had a couple of rough ones, but again, you could see that potential, and he's been more good than not, in my opinion.
Yes.
So if you can understand, and you know what? After the initial freak out, I saw what Hubert Davis wanted to do. They executed the plan, and they went out there and they actually did it. Okay. They won the regular season. They swept Duke. They got to the championship game, lost to an NC State team that clearly has clicked and is a completely different story altogether. So you can't sit here and tell me that Well, I've seen enough out of Hubert Davis. I know where this is going. You don't. You don't know what the transfer portal is going to give. You don't know the development of Elliot Cadeau. You basically have to take this year by year now, just truly year by year, and just kind of roll the dice and see where it goes. I think Duke's going to be going through this. I mean, obviously, we know what Duke's got coming with Cooper Flagg, but we also know some of the deficiencies around Duke, and how do they address that? You know, how do they get through the portal? Everybody's dealing with it right now. North Carolina's not all that different. But if you were questioning Hubert Davis after last year and they produced the kind of year that they did this year and they got to the Sweet 16 and an uncharacteristically bad shooting night from RJ Davis ultimately knocks them out of the NCAA tournament, I'm really at a loss as to you can make big picture proclamations about the program.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it was good to bring up Shire because I think, and what's so exciting to me about kind of the way the rivalry is going now is that, like, I think we get to see these coaches really kind of grow, and we have already seen that from them, and like see them kind of learn as they're going along. Like we just saw two guys that kind of already knew what they were doing a little bit in Roy Williams and Mike Krzyzewski for a long time. And so now we get to see kind of their proteges, so to speak, take over, and they're learning on the job a bit as they go. And I just think that's been kind of exciting to watch. I think Hubert has grown a lot as a coach, and even throughout this year, I thought he did. And I think John Shire has done the exact same thing. And I think you should be excited overall if you're a Carolina, not like excited about the way tonight ended up, understandable, but like I think you should be excited about kind of the direction that things are going. And you know what? This team got its toughness back. That has been something that had been questioned a lot in the previous 2 years, and more than the previous 2 years, to be honest. Like Carolina was not a team. Carolina might lose this year, but they were not a team to get punked, really. And that's definitely something that you should be proud of, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you on this, and I'm curious to see what RJ Davis is going to do after the season. Because remember, it's over for Armando Bacot, but it's not necessarily over for RJ Davis. Maybe the whole nucleus of this team and why you came back was a part of having it with Armando Bacot, and he's just going to go, which is fine, makes total sense. Get to a point where you're too old to be on a college campus, and it's time to move on with your life. I get all that stuff, but I got to imagine, big picture wise, both for Armando Bacot and RJ Davis, this season is going to eat at them in a major way. In that, you know, Armando Bacot has had statistically really impressive years at Carolina, and COVID year or whatever. I know people want to nitpick. Doesn't matter. The dude was a double machine. He was very, very consistent. The problem at Carolina is that ultimately you are judged by what you win, right? And you know, RJ is going to go up in the, I think RJ is going to go up in the rafters, right? Because of winning the ACC Player of the Year. I don't think Bacot is, if I'm not mistaken. I have to go double check on that one because I know there's very specific criteria for this. But ultimately,
I'm pretty sure no. Yeah.
Okay, I'm pretty sure no. But ultimately, you're there to put banners up, right? And it just never panned out for Armando Bacot at Carolina. They've got that Final Four trip. They were a half away from potentially winning the national championship. Yes, they sent, Coach K home packing on his last game in the Final Four and things like that. But ultimately, and you're always going to have that, but ultimately you want to put stuff up in the rafters. And that's going to be a tricky legacy for both RJ Davis if he decides to go, and what's going on with Armando Bacot. And I think that's what's going to eat at them with a game like this, getting knocked out in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, and I think it's like the way they went out. It's not so much the fact that they lost. It's the fact that I'm sure both of them feel like they could have done more to make that not happen. And so they're maybe a little haunted by that for sure. I mean, I think that Armando is his legacy overall, though, I think will be a positive one. I think for a lot of UNC fans, I don't think that they're going to look back and go, well, he didn't win any titles or anything. I think they'll look back and just say, that's a guy that they got to watch for a long time. And I mean, talk about a guy who grew. This dude, I still remember him as a freshman who was a complete head case every other basketball game. Like he would have a game where he'd have like 10 and 10. And then all of a sudden the next game he would like get a foul early and then disappear and be a little, in his feelings. And he really, he grew out of that and learned to kind of channel that in the right direction. And, he really even improved as this year went along. Like he could stay on the perimeter and move his feet a little bit and switch onto guards and stuff like that. Like, I just think UNC fans, I think, have a lot of affection for him for sure. And I don't think that'll change based on the fact that they didn't. I mean, what were they going to do? Like, they would have had to hope that something happens to UConn along the way. Because, like, UConn plays terribly for a half today and ends up down, or what were they, up 9 at half?
Yeah.
So, like, let's be, I'm not, there are years you could look back at a Carolina loss and go, oh, well, what would they have done if they'd gotten past that game? Like, they really could have beaten X team. But I don't think this was one of those. So, you know, I mean, I'm not saying you can't still be mad about like when you lost and how.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, this wasn't a Carolina team, in my personal opinion, that was winning the title. And I think we'll probably see that.
Yeah, it's interesting that there was an ongoing debate throughout the season about how or whether or not this North Carolina squad was elite. Right. And I think you and I both agreed, and Giglio and I have talked about that. When you compare them to North Carolina squads that were actually elite, teams that truly were here to win a championship, not have a chance to win a championship, they do not compare. I did Sirius XM with Wes Durham and John Henson last week. And I even asked that John Henson, I'm like, come on, man. I mean, you were part of some groups and you've been around some groups. That's not what this team is. This team has to win a very specific.
John was on only one really good one, and of course, I was gonna say, and I don't know that I would take this. I don't know that I would take that one over this one, but I don't know.
Roy would, though, because Roy loved that team, and he still thinks that that's one that got away. Remember, that was one that kind of got away because
they were playing really well by the end of the year.
I mean, that was the Creighton year. That was I think a lot of Carolina fans look at that as had XYZ not happened.
No, that's fair. Yeah, maybe I would take them then.
So, but the point that I was making with this particular group, if Giglio were here, and I'm sure he'll bring it up tomorrow when we do an after dark following the State Marquette game, he'd have the yellow pad. He's got the yellow pad stat right. He's got the yellow pad right here, but I don't know where the stat is. What was the final score of this game? What did Alabama score? 89? The magic rule of 80. You know, Carolina had to play a very specific way to win basketball games. And shot selection aside, jacked up threes aside, RJ Davis not making a three, going 0 for 9. Defensively, they allowed Alabama way too many looks on those corner threes on the right.
Especially in transition. Yeah.
Especially in transition. That's not how Carolina won basketball games this year. Just straight up. That's not how they won basketball games this year. So it all kind of like checks boxes. Like, tell me Carolina lost, and I can tell you some particulars of what happened in that game without having watched it. Oh, did they give up X amount of points? You know, was one of their key players unable to really get going? Check. That all happened tonight for the Tar Heels. From Ken Brownlow, what was it like going to freshman convocation?
All right.
With Armando?
Should I be complimented or insulted?
I think that's a compliment. Sure. I think that's a compliment. From Brandon, Cadeau's a good piece to have if he develops. Everything else is up in the air, but it's Carolina that will attract transfers. Yes, that's exactly it. Just like Duke. There's no reason why those two schools should miss out on transfers. They have everything in place.
It's almost like it's like recruiting, right? Like people want to go there.
From Jess, in the season of the transfer portal, I appreciated Baycott sticking around through the coaching change, COVID, etc. And you know what? Jess brings up a very, very good point.
I think that's partly why Carolina fans really feel that way.
That's exactly it. Yeah. No, that's exactly it in the grand scheme of thing. One game defines a season when it's to win a championship. Yeah.
That's a good point. I can see that.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. All right. To Clemson, where they're in the Elite Eight. And Clemson kind of gets us to a phenomenon that we've experienced really for the first time in the NCAA tournament when we talk about ACC basketball. But a lot of props have to go to Brad Brownell. Clemson.
I'm sorry, do you mean Dabo Swinney?
Yeah, Dabo.
Shout out to Dabo Swinney.
Do you think Charles Barkley was saying that sarcastically? Do you think it was just kind of like a joke?
I don't know, because it's like I still can't tell. I've watched it more than once, and the way he reacted when Ernie like kind of semi-corrected him after, he looked a little embarrassed, but like not quite. I honestly don't know. Did he know his name? Don't know.
I don't know. I really don't. It certainly threw me off. But all that being said, Clemson is here because, and let me see if I can pull up the stat real quick. from our friend Brian Ives over at the ACC Network. I've got all these things that I ended up kind of liking so I could get back to them on social media. So this is from Brian Ives, and he pointed out, my very unofficial count, Clemson trailed by a combined 51 seconds against New Mexico, Baylor, and Arizona. They've been the most impressive team of the tournament, in my opinion. He's absolutely right. And the reason why they've been able to get here is because of defense, rebounding, and timely offense. I mean, PJ Hall and the crew have done an excellent job. And on top of that, I know everybody lost their minds with that inbound play late that ultimately helped Clemson win that game. Brad Brownell will draw that bad boy up. He absolutely won the coaching battle tonight against Arizona, put Caleb Love in a situation where he was rushing shots and jacking up shots, and it put him in position to win. And now they're one game away from the Final Four.
I'm sure seeing him before probably helped at least a little bit, right? You would think like having some knowledge of Caleb from before, even though Caleb, I know, has made some improvements to his game and whatnot, but knowing his tendencies, I'm sure helped a little bit. But Brad Brownell drawing up the baseline out of bounds plays, every single one of them worked. I couldn't tell if it was bad defense or he was doing it really well against Baylor too, though. I'm sitting here what is this? Chase Hunter's out there just getting buckets left and right. My guy, Ian Shefflin, my favorite. He's co-captain of my Brownlow team with DJ Burns because I love those guys. I love guys that have a versatile skill set that can pass, they can post up, they get in there, get the rebounds, all that stuff. I love guys like that. And Ian Shefflin is my dude. PJ Hall stayed out of foul trouble until the second half, but then got right in it. But whatever. I mean, they figure out a way. And every time Arizona kept making a run, Clemson always had an answer.
So it's funny you mentioned the Caleb Love in the ACC and Brad Brownell having seen Caleb Love. And I was going to go ahead and go back through Ken Pom and look up Caleb Love's stats versus Clemson when he was in the ACC. But our friend David Hill at ESPN went ahead and put that together for us. And Caleb Love's 4 career games versus Clemson, 0 for 9 from 3, 13 points in a loss, 6 of 9, nice, 23 points in a 20-point win, 2 of 7 from 3, 10 points in a 2-point win, and 1 of 6 from 3, 9 points in a loss. So those are Caleb's numbers versus Clemson, whether it was at UNC and now this against when he was at Arizona. So Brad Brownell might kind of have an idea of what to do with Caleb Love, and it obviously paid off. And this gets us to one of the more amusing YouTube comments that I've seen today. Is anyone truly ready for the Brownell-Keats national championship game? Loser gets fired. I mean, it's interesting. Both guys, both Brad Brownell and Kevin Keats, are in really interesting positions in that Brownell's a survivor. I think they understand. I mean, Brownell survived. Brownell has survived at a place that has some basketball history, that's football crazy, and doesn't make the NCAA tournament a ton, right? And of course, Kevin Keats is a story we've talked about ad nauseum throughout this year and this run. But
to be fair, Brad wasn't getting fired after this season, so we're all clear. Clemson had a terrific season, and I am not they're a good team. They deserve to be where they're at right now, but that's still funny.
That is pretty funny. But the funniest thing tonight, and we'll close on this, the funniest thing tonight actually has to do with this phenomenon that we've seen with ACC fans and how they've been kind of brought together by the way national media has talked about the ACC, not this year, but really the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's cumulative. It has been worse this year, noticeably so.
Yeah, it has been cumulative. And I actually think that Craig Meyer, who used to cover Pitt for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, had put this on Twitter, and it's a good launching off point for where I'm at with all of this. And Craig said, quote, "I always thought of the ACC as fractured, longtime members who viewed newcomers as interlopers that ruined the conference's identity, new additions that wished they were back in the Big East for the non-football sports. And then came a John Rothstein tweet about a 2-bid league. And then now here we are." I've had some pushback about something that I said after 4 teams got to the Sweet 16. And I said that the ACC or ACC fandom doesn't do the whole conference pride thing. And I understand the pushback on it. So let me rephrase, and I think more people will understand where I'm coming from on this. And Brownlow, you can maybe tell me I'm right or wrong on this. Conference pride is a point of view. The ACC has never been a group of people that want to be ridiculous like SEC fans, right? Like they're not the type to go ACC, right? Even though apparently, according to our guy Taylor Vippolis, there was a Clemson assistant coach who saw the Carolina guys as they were running off the court, and they started saying ACC MFers, which that kind of encapsulates the ACC's vibe, right?
Well, I mean, I said to me, like Craig's tweet, I think I responded to this too. It was like the premise to a documentary about the ACC's like fuck you tour.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what this is. It's not like a hurrah for our achievement. It's like a fuck you and shut up. Yeah. Basically, like stop it. Stop talking shit. Calm down. Be rational. Don't lie to everyone about what you're seeing because we can see too.
So there's pride in the conference. It's a conference that, I mean, clearly there's pride in the conference because people wouldn't react to the changes in the conference over the last 20 years, right? People would not react the way they've reacted to the additions of Stanford, Cal, and SMU and not being proactive with conference realignment or just basically saying, hey, stand pat, those kinds of things, right? Or how people kind of rally around how we talk about Notre Dame and whether or not they're, using the league and everything else. So there is pride in that sense, but Clemson being part of a lawsuit to get out of the ACC while at the same time fans cheering on Clemson for the sake of the league is a perfect distillation of where we're at with the conference and why I really enjoy the conference in the grand scheme of things. Like, it's not unity, it's FU energy. It's a lot of people have pointed out to me, it's kind of like how people are with family. Yes, I can talk shit about my brother. I can say some things about my dad or my brother-in-law or whatever, but you can't. You can't. And the minute you do, well, now we have to stand on business, as the kids would say, right? And I think that's where we're at. And I think that so many people have just been taking a giant dump on the league that at some point people go, you know what? Screw you. I'm going to enjoy the ACC making you guys look like idiots. I'm going to enjoy the fact that them winning has you tweeting through it and just contorting yourself to try to make your point somehow valid. And I think ACC fans, it's like the Predator meme. It's like, all right, we found common ground. And that common ground is watching those dudes squirm. And I kind of enjoy it.
Like, let the ACC crap on itself. I don't know why people don't understand this. The ACC's always good for it.
Mm-hmm.
They are. They'll always manage to find a way to do it, to crap on themselves. Like, but you don't have to do it for them. And it just, to me, it almost feels like throwing pot. It's like a bully. It almost feels like bully energy, like throwing pot shots at a league that you feel like, right or wrong, but probably is like basically dead in the water. You don't have to care about what ACC basketball fans think about you. Well, I mean, you don't have to care, but I also don't have to respect you anymore if you're going to talk out of your ass on a consistent basis. I don't have to agree. Like, I don't have to respect your opinion on anything if I know that you're just out here spouting off things that you don't know anything about.
From the E-Flight guy in the YouTube comment section, another Wolfpack fan. Can't say that I would have enjoyed seeing UNC win, but I might have enjoyed the ACC Schadenfreude continuing. That's it.
I have never seen this many state fans not say they were cheering for UNC because I didn't see that except for maybe Jules, although that was even like tenuous.
Yeah, it was.
It was more like I don't want them to win, but I also am enjoying the FU tour. And that's the energy that this is. That's the only time I've ever seen state fans even remotely be like, maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing ever if UNC were to win. Was this because everyone's just tired of it. We're all just very tired.
Well, that's going to wrap it up. We'll do this again tomorrow. We got NC State versus Marquette. We've got Duke, Houston. You think Clemson's going to be the only team that moves on to the Elite Eight? Wouldn't that be funny?
Would be some real ACC shit right there, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be the most ACC thing? I don't know. Duke's gonna have its hands full. I like the way they're playing.
Yeah.
Obviously, I love the way State's playing too. I don't listen, I know better than to try to predict anything, especially when it comes to the state team. I don't think they'll be the only team, but I honestly don't know which of the other two it would be at this point. So it's just hard for me to imagine them being the only one.
So it's interesting with NC State. Gilio and I were talking about this today before we actually did the podcast, and I'm sure we'll talk about it tomorrow, depending on how the game goes. But ironically, NC State's fortunes really do kind of depend if the officiating if it continues how it's been for NC State. NC State's been in games from the ACC tournament on. They've been in games where they've kind of let them play. DJ Burns has become a phenomenon, and people have been enjoying watching DJ Burns play on a national level because they've let him, right? They've let him for the most part. So if that continues against Marquette, then I kind of like NC State's chances. They're locked in. They're confident. That stuff is stacked and stacked and stacked, and I don't see that going away. So it does kind of come down to how that game is going to be officiated. And I don't say that in the context of the refs are out to screw NC State. I think we just recognize that not every game is the same. Some games are going to be called a little tightly. Some games are not. Sometimes it changes in the middle of the game. And we certainly saw a little bit of that in the game between North Carolina and Alabama. But if they let them play, then I like State's chances. Duke, it's tough with Duke because I've fallen for this with the Blue Devils. I really have.
Me too. Yeah.
I've fallen for it where I understand that Duke's season has been one that has dealt with injuries, not having the same lineups for a good chunk of the season, all sorts of weird stuff, right? But when you've seen all the pieces together, they'll show you those flashes of, okay, I get it. I can see where this team has something, right? But every time that happens, they end up kind of falling flat on their face. They don't look like they have that edge. They can say all the right things that they've found their edge again. They've heard the talk about toughness and they want to go out and show their toughness, and they certainly put their foot down against JMU. But Houston's a different animal, and I just don't see it for the Blue Devils. But like I said, I have not been able to get the Blue Devils right all season. I'm not going to get them right now.
And I think officiating will again play a big part in that one as well, because Houston is very and again, this isn't like hot takey. I don't think they're very grabby. They're physical. And if that goes uncalled, I think Duke's gonna have a hard time with that. And if get Filipowski saddled with a few silly fouls after that kind of physicality, and I just feel like it could go very quickly off the rails for Duke. But if they start calling, Houston got called for a bunch of fouls in that game. So if they ref them that way again, then I think that gives Duke a chance for sure. But even then, Houston's really good. They're definitely playing for kind of a bigger purpose as well, seemingly. And they're just really, really difficult to play against. And I think, if UConn weren't in the field, they'd definitely be one of those teams that I would like a lot to potentially win it all. But UConn is in the field, unfortunately, for everyone else. I hate to say that, but it's also where do they lose? I don't see it. I just don't.
Hurley had the quote of the tournament. I'm paraphrasing here. I just saw it floating around, but essentially it was, we haven't been good in close games, so we just made sure we weren't in one. That's just kind of the attitude they're at right now.
It's 09 UNC energy.
Just, yeah.
Right?
Don't leave no doubt.
Because I remember people were saying that about that team, I feel like. And then they were like, well, we just won't have any.
All right. That's going to wrap it up for OG After Dark. We'll, again, do this tomorrow after the NC State Marquette game. We'll probably go around halftime of the Duke-Houston game, so we can at least guarantee Gilio watches about 20 minutes of Duke basketball.
It's the NCAA tournament. He's gonna watch it.
Nah. Sometimes you got to stick with what you know. And Gilio is very much like, it keeps working out for Duke when I don't watch him. So there you go. I'm just not gonna watch him.
Okay, fair enough.
He's being sarcastic, but it is what it is. Anyway, that's gonna wrap it up. We will see you tomorrow night.